Welcome back to Whispers of Turkish Stars, your cozy corner for the most tender, breathtaking, and unforgettable moments from the world of Turkish celebrities. Tonight, we're reliving a scene that stopped an entire hall in its tracks and then raced across the internet like a spark on silk. It happened at last night's glittering awards ceremony, a night bursting with expectation and electricity. Ebru Şahin walked on stage to accept the title every actress dreams of, and while her triumph was already certain, what she chose to say turned a beautiful victory into a living memory. In front of a room packed with peers, producers, and fans, she dedicated her honor to the man who has been her anchor and her quiet fire, Akin. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was a flood of feeling, and it left the room breathless. From the moment Ebru stepped into the light, draped in a gown that caught every flicker and shimmer, the atmosphere changed. People stood long before she reached the microphone, applause rolling like a wave that just kept coming. She smiled, soft, steady, grateful, but the real story started when her voice began to tremble. She looked out into the hall, past the flashes and the lenses, and found him in the crowd. There was a pause, a visible gathering of courage, and then she spoke. She thanked her colleagues, she acknowledged the work, but then she slipped beyond formality. She said that somewhere along the way, when the pressure felt like too much and the noise became too loud, one person made the difference. She said that Akin didn't just love her, he steadied her, pushed her, and gently reminded her who she was. She said he brought light where there had been fog. There was a hush that stretched and deepened, the kind that happens only when 100 hearts are leaning forward to hold the same moment. The cameras found Akin sitting far from the stage lights, and his face said what the words could not. His eyes were bright. He rose. He applauded her as if the applause were a vow he was making all over again. It wasn't dramatic, it was honest, and in that honesty, the room felt something rare. The host stepped back and smiled without speaking. Even the band didn't dare cut in with music. Everyone knew the speech had crossed a line from celebration to something deeply intimate and defiantly public. When Ebru went on, she wasn't just listing names or thanking the machine behind a hit project. She called out the person who had stood with her in the storms that never make the covers, exhausting days on set, headlines that twisted meaning, days when nothing felt good enough. She lifted her trophy and said it wasn't hers alone, that the person who watched her learn lines by lamplight and who reminded her to eat and breathe and laugh deserved to be named in that moment. She looked at Akin again, and the room looked with her. It felt like time rearranged itself and made room for them. As soon as the show wrapped, the scene detonated across social media. Clips of Ebru's shaky voice and glistening eyes filled timelines within minutes. Fan pages wrote that this was the confession they had always believed was true. Comment sections filled with lines like, "I didn't expect to cry tonight," and, "When success doesn't make you forget the person who held you together, that's love." Reporters who usually dissect fashion and form suddenly wrote about sincerity, about how a speech can sound different when it's not designed to trend but ends up doing exactly that because it's pure. People close to Ebru insisted there was nothing planned about it. She had a neat list prepared in her phone, names of directors, teammates, stylists, mentors. She intended to thank everyone, and she did. But something changed when her heel touched that glossy stage and the weight of the past year settled on her shoulders. Memories came in fast, early mornings that darkened into nights, drafts of scenes that never felt right until she ran them with him, quiet afternoons when she doubted herself and he made tea and told her that doubt is just a hallway, not a home. That was the moment, they said, when the words left the page and came from a deeper place. One of her friends described how Ebru's eyes blurred before she even reached the microphone, how she kept blinking as if trying to stay in control and then stopped fighting it. And it wasn't only Ebru who spoke that night. After the ceremony, as reporters circled and microphones multiplied, someone asked Akin what he thought of her tribute. He smiled, unsteady, disarmed, and chose a sentence that felt like it had been waiting in him for a long time. He said that hearing his name and her thanks felt bigger than any statue he could hold. He said that seeing her shine was like winning all over again. The words were spare, but the way he said them made them heavy with meaning. He wasn't trying to steal the scene. He was putting it back in her hands and letting everyone know that his pride in her eclipsed everything else. If you followed Ebru and Akin, you know that their relationship has often been described as a partnership first and a romance second, not because the love is small, but because the alliance is enormous. Friends whisper about the private gestures, handwritten notes tucked into script pages, long walks far from cameras, phone calls between takes when one of them needs a voice that doesn't demand or judge, only understands. They have spoken, sparingly, about how art can drain you dry if you don't protect the parts that make you human, how fame is loud, but the things that matter most prefer quiet. Last night, the quiet stepped into the center of the room and asked to be seen. Colleagues said later that the tenderness of that moment made everybody else more generous. Other winners gave softer speeches. People listened more. An actress who had lost out on the same category reportedly hugged Ebru backstage and told her that the right person always makes you fearless. A director looking on from a few rows back was overheard saying that you can light a stage 1,000 ways, but nothing glows like gratitude. The story didn't end with the confetti and the photographs. After the cameras shut off, Ebru and Akin slipped into a quieter space with a handful of friends, some from set, some from childhood, all from the inner circle that keeps life sane. The room was small and warm, the kind of place where music hums low and conversations overlap. Ebru held her trophy with both hands as if she didn't trust herself to put it down yet. At some point, she turned to Akin and told him that this victory felt shared, that every time she thought she couldn't push another inch, he believed another mile on her behalf. He laughed and told her that it had always been her, that he just held the light up so she could see the way. Their friends clapped, not because anyone asked them to, but because some moments feel better when you add your hands to them. The comments from the industry poured in. An actor who has known them both for years posted that Ebru hadn't simply collected a prize, she had reminded everyone why they care about the craft in the first place. A presenter said the ceremony, grand as it was, felt suddenly intimate, as if the hall had shrunk to hold only two people talking across a crowded room. A journalist wrote that the love people assume celebrity couples perform can sometimes be the most real thing you'll ever watch, if you know where to look. People who admire them love to point out how steady they are in storms. There have been weeks when work kept them on opposite sides of the map, long shoots, new projects, calendars that refuse to speak the same language. There have been rumors and pressures and the small daily frictions that every relationship must navigate. Through all of it, those who know them best say that they return to simple rituals, morning messages, evening check-ins, promises kept quietly. Maybe that's why last night rang so true. The speech didn't sound like a performance because it was built out of 1,000 performances that no one ever saw, little acts of showing up. One of Ebru's oldest friends told us that she had seen the beginnings of this story long before the rest of the world did. She remembered a day when Ebru, nursing disappointment after an audition that went cold, sat on a bench and stared at the ground. Her phone rang. She answered. A minute later, she was laughing, not because the situation had changed, but because the weight had shifted. The voice on the other end had reminded her to separate her worth from her work, to measure herself by the love she gives and receives, not by the line she lands. That call, the friend said, was from Akin. It's easy to say that years later, a shining knight was inevitable. It never is. It's built, carefully, by people who choose each other when no one is watching. Back on the carpet, as the night cooled, Ebru's words kept echoing. She spoke about patience and about the courage it takes to be soft in a room that rewards steel. She mentioned that every role had taught her something, but that the lesson that mattered most came from the way a certain person looked at her when she doubted herself, as if the doubt were a passing cloud and she were the sky. She lifted her eyes one last time to the corner where he was standing now, the crowd parting a little around him as if the moment itself wanted them to be closer. And there it was again, that exchange of glances that says, "We know what it took." By morning, editors had spliced together montages of the moment. Music swelled beneath her words. Commentators discussed whether emotions like that should stay private or whether the world needs to see more of them. The audience had already decided. They clipped, shared, replayed. They told their own stories in the comments about people who had stood beside them through exams and surgeries and first days and last days. It became bigger than a trophy. It became a reminder, arriving in shimmering packaging, of how much we rely on each other. We've also heard that the decision to speak from the heart surprised even Ebru. She reportedly confided afterwards that she had planned to keep it professional and brief, to smile, to wave, to leave. But standing under that chandeliered ceiling, looking out at a year's worth of work and a lifetime's worth of love, she couldn't be anyone but herself. And herself, last night, was not just an actress at a microphone, but a woman in love, thankful, humbled, and unafraid to let the truth be seen. As for Akin, those who approached him later said he looked equal parts proud and undone. When someone repeated Ebru's line about him turning on the light when she needed it most, he reportedly replied that the brightest thing he has ever seen is the sight of her believing in herself. He joked, gently, that if awards glowed in the dark, he wouldn't need a lamp anymore because her joy was bright enough to read by. It's a small, playful image, but it stayed with people, maybe because it sounded like the banter of two people who know how to make a heavy world feel lighter. In the days to come, this moment will sit beside their other milestones, premieres, projects, photographs that managed to catch them unguarded and laughing. But something about last night felt like a chapter marker, the kind you dog-ear so you can come back to it when you forget why you started reading. It said that ambition and tenderness don't have to compete, that you can climb and care at the same time, that the applause is loud but the hand you hold afterward is louder. We'll remember the golden light and the sparkle and the way the hall inhaled at the same time. We'll remember the words, not because they were grand, but because they were true. We'll remember how two people who have been cautious about guarding their private world decided, for one suspended instant, to let everyone in and show the foundation that holds everything up. If you've ever wondered whether success can deepen love instead of distracting from it, you got your answer last night. Tell us what you felt watching that moment. Did you recognize something of your own life in it? Do you believe, as many do, that love not only softens the edges of hardship but sharpens your focus, makes you braver, steadier, kinder? Share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories like this, moments that remind us why these stars mean so much, make sure you subscribe to Whispers of Turkish Stars. We'll be here, bringing you the stories that glow long after the lights go out, and celebrating every time love steps into the spotlight and refuses to be shy.